For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristina Stanley. I am the CEO and founder of Fictionary. This is my company that I started from scratch. It was a breath of an idea that I had then turned into a spreadsheet and then made Fictionary. So, of course, I love it because, it's mine. So, today we are going to talk about the story arc scenes in a mystery novel. So, I just introduced myself. I'm also going to introduce Lisa Taylor, Lisa Wave. So Lisa is an expert in editing series and also mystery, which is why we're writing this book together. And we're going to do a series of these events. So as we research and make our discoveries while we're looking at mystery novels, we're going to have these events and share them until we get the book written, just for fun. And so one of our goals too is to hear what people are asking, like where are the struggles? What can't you find out there that you would like an answer to? And then we're going to go and research it and figure it out. So first thing we're going to talk about is our definition of a mystery. And here, oh, suspense. See, there's the thing, Eve. This is why we're talking about our definition. Because mystery is a crazy genre out there right now of what actually is a mystery. So what Lisa and I are starting with is there's a crime committed and it must be solved. And that's it. And so within this, of course, we're going to see all kinds of stories. But if it's a mystery, there's some kind of crime. It can be murder, but it doesn't have to be. It can be it can be a thief. That could be the antagonist. We're going to talk about some of the different types, and today we're going to talk about the story arc for a traditional mystery. Mystery is kind of, we all think of a crime is committed and it has to be solved. Then we have a cozy, but here a cozy generally means there's a crime and it must be solved, but the search for clues is done by a novice, so not a professional person. And the violence level is down. Often we don't even see the murder. It's happened off page and now it's being investigated. So it sits on the softer end of the spectrum. Then we have psychological thrillers. So here's the thing. This is a big thing right now. You'll see there are many books out right now. It's very popular to talk about a psychological thriller as a mystery, or sorry, as a mystery as a psychological thriller. It's the hot seller this year. And so you'll see there's many mysteries out there that are labeled as a psychological thriller, but are actually a mystery. And so the key point here is what we're looking at is what you, the author, are trying to write. When you look at what's published, the genres are labeled for selling. And so a mystery can be labeled a romance. It can be labeled a psychological thriller. It can be labeled a fantasy. It can be labeled any of these things. And so when we talk about genre, it's about controlling what you're writing and your intent to write, and not about what you're using to market the book, which can be completely different. A psychological thriller is usually there's dark mode, there's dark, like it's dark mind, dark motive. You might not even know what the crime is. You may or may not know who the antagonist is. So it sits a little bit different from a traditional mystery. Then we have a police procedural, and that's more about how the crime is solved. So we'll see more about, well, I found DNA here and this glove was over here, and how the team is solving a crime versus a detective, which is more like a cozy in that there's a protagonist who's a professional instead of an amateur. So now we're going to go through the story arc. Can I mix it with romance? Of course you can. Everything mixes with romance. And it's because everybody likes romance. No one wants to admit it, but everybody loves to read romance. And so when it's, a mystery, oh, but there happens to be romance, everybody likes, everything goes with romance. That's Linda O'Donnell, yes. Castro, the one I'm reading now, is maybe a thriller cozy. That's interesting too, right? So this genre is wide open. So what we're looking at here is the story arc for a traditional mystery where a crime has happened and somebody's going to discover who committed this crime. right? And the somebody is the protagonist. And so in the inciting incident, there's a crime committed. Now, who wants to tell me what's the difference between an inciting incident in a mystery novel and the inciting incident in a romance novel?
Romance is Meet the Cute, and you've
Yep.
got it up on the screen, crime committed.
In a crime or a mystery novel, the inciting incident can happen before the story starts or in the story. In a romance, it cannot. So that's the one thing about a romance inciting incident. The reader wants to see the characters meet. It's very important in the romance story, and so it always happens on the page. Where in a mystery, crime could already have happened. Or it happens in the book, but not on the page because it's a cozy. And so when you're writing a mystery, you have to decide, are you going to show the crime or not? And that's going to help you decide where you are in the genre spectrum from cozy to detective, which is really important. You need to know what you actually want to write. And anyone who knows went through the fantasy and there's the tree of all the decisions you have to make, or the series, sorry. It's like that at the beginning. You kind of have to decide what type of mystery you're writing to know, does the inciting incident have to be shown or not? All right. So then we have plot point one. This is where the protagonist accepts the goal to solve the mystery. It's often a crime scene. So in a police procedural, it might be the actual crime scene. In a cozy, it might just be that the protagonist has discovered something that's going to push them forward to actually find out who the murderer is. And the reaction to this scene is going to show how the protagonist feels about what they discovered in this plot point. So the reaction scenes are very important in this type of story because really bad things are happening. And of course, you have to have a reaction. And then they're going to go through their goal attempts of trying to achieve the story goal. Then we get to the middle point, and we all know it's a false victory or defeat. The protagonist goes from reactive to proactive. But what happens here quite often in a murder mystery is there is a second dead body. So something has really changed. There is some kind of twist that changes who the suspects are. This is where the suspects start to get limited. So up until middle plot point, you're going to have more suspects, and there's going to be some that get eliminated by middle plot point. So now the protagonist can get proactive because there's a limited number of suspects, and they can start looking. All right, and then plot point two, also the same as every other story. Plot point two is where the protagonist is at the lowest of their low. So in a typical mystery, so it's either the cozy, the amateur sleuth, the detective, something has happened to put them at the bottom. In a murder mystery, this can often be that they have caused the death of somebody else. They made a mistake in their between middle plot point and plot point two of something they were doing, but it causes something really bad to happen, and it's pretty much their fault because they drove the investigation in that direction. Now, we all know from plot point two, this is where they get their final piece of information by they, the protagonist, and they need that piece of information to solve the crime. So this is the last point in the story that you drop a clue. After that, it's all action to the climax. And from here, they're going to eliminate more suspects based on that clue. And it's getting narrower and narrower so that when it comes to the climax scene, the reader should be going, oh, I didn't see that coming. But yeah, that makes sense. Is the balance you're trying to find, and how you do that. You put your final clue here. So when you're looking at your mystery, you want to be looking at, you don't add to anything after this for clues. In the climax scene, they have to solve the mystery. It's a must. It doesn't matter which of these, they must solve the crime. There's been a crime, got to be solved. We need to know who did it, and often we want to know why. Now, the why can come in this scene or it can come in the resolution scenes of now that we know who did it, then we figure out why. And that comes in, before the end of the book, right? And then you can close out the book. Any questions on this before I go? Does another dead body also happen in a cozy? Carla, quite often. And again, it'll be discovered off scene. So there's a woman in the garden with a potted plant on her head and she's dead. And usually, again, the protagonist had something to do with that. Not that they did it, but just that their actions drove it. Okay, what is this? Is this a missing person or a thievery? Yeah, great question, Betty Jo. So there, same thing. So the crime committed, someone's been kidnapped, someone's gone missing. We don't know why yet. Something's been stolen. So that's the inciting incident is the same. The plot point one is the same. The protagonist accepts the story goal if they're going to figure out where that missing person is or who stole the jewelry, whatever the crime happens to be. So you can apply this across all of the crimes. You might not need the dead body. You could throw one in, if you need one in your story, but you might not. So if it's a jewelry heist, nobody might die. It's perfectly acceptable. Or in the missing person, nobody there. It could be that as well. They're going to come close to it. We're going to think maybe that missing person is dead, but they don't have to die, and you don't have to throw in extra dead bodies. Eve says, would the story arc scenes apply to a character-driven suspense novel where the suspect is known from the beginning and the protagonist wants to use that info to blackmail? Okay, so Eve, what you're talking about, if the suspect is known from the beginning, it's a thriller. The story arc's going to be the requirements are going to be a little bit different, and we'll cover that in a different session because it's a whole big topic. But the real thing, the difference between the mystery is in the mystery, we don't know who did it, and that's why it's a mystery. In a thriller, it's often we know who did it, and the battle is to stop them from doing something worse. So a thriller is really about stopping a future crime. Now, if you're doing a blackmail, you're getting into maybe it's a psychological thriller because there's a dark aspect to it related to the protagonist, right? They want to do something dark like blackmail somebody. So you could be blurring across that line. So cozy, yeah, Penelope. Sure. So a cozy mystery really it's an amateur sleuth. And so it's not a professional, it's not a police, a detective, etc. It's typically done in a smaller town or a closed environment, and there's less violence. And so we think of, like I said, the potted plant, like there's a woman in the garden who's been hit in the head with a plant, but you don't see it happening. There's no description of all the blood everywhere or whatever horror things happen. It's just there. And then the whole story is about figuring out who did it and why they did it. Just looking at our books that are already out. So coming in 2024 is Writing a Fantasy with Lucy, who many of you know, and then Secrets to Writing and Editing a Mystery with Lisa. And of course, my big ask is if you've read the top 3, could you post a review? That would be awesome. Amazon Goodreads would be fantastic.